And then they said, you have a virus. There is no cure. You've got between 2 and 9 months to live, but you can go home.
Welcome to HIV The Morning After. I'm Dan Hall. I'm a documentary producer and director. I've spent my entire adult life watching ignorance and prejudice play out around HIV. And frankly, I'm tired of it. And I'm sure many of you are too. This podcast is an attempt to do something about that. Not through lectures or statistics, but by doing what I do best. Interviewing people and letting them tell their own stories. Real voices, lived experiences, no bullshit. These conversations matter, and if you think so too, please rate, review, and share HIV The Morning After. I can make these episodes, but I can't make people listen to them or find them on their algorithms. That bit's down to you. You can reach me at hivthemorningafter@gmail.com. Right then, let's get started. So today, I'm speaking with Jonathan Blake. Jonathan is a truly remarkable figure. Diagnosed with HIV in October 1982, he is now one of the country's longest-term survivors, an activist whose story of resilience includes his pivotal role in the Lesbians and Gays Support the Minors group, famously depicted in the film Pride. Jonathan, it is genuinely a joy to welcome you to The Morning After. Hello there.
Thank you. Hello. And I tell you, it's a pleasure to be here.
Jonathan, can you take us to a period before you started to be symptomatic? Can you tell me what Jonathan was like? What was the world like? What was the gay scene like?
Well, the gay scene was beginning to kind of thrive, because we're talking about like 1980. I had been an actor. I was an actor. When I was out of work, I used to work restaurants. There was this restaurant that opened in London in round about sort of 1977 or 78 called Joe Allen. Joe Allen in New York was famous because they said all their waiters were out of work actors. So it opened in London. And I started to work there when I was out of work. And it was great because I would meet all my actor friends who were working in the West End or what have you, who would be coming in.
I love Joe Allen's. I had my 16th birthday there.
It was literally next door to the Lyceum Theatre. And you would go down those stairs, wouldn't you? And you'd come into the bar and then the restaurant opened up.
It was just martinis and Broadway posters.
Yeah.
Really, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And flirty waiters.
Of course we flirted. You're trained to flirt. Well, if you want tips, you are. And the stars came in because they were treated just like ordinary people, but they were, placed where they weren't going to get hassled. So Liz Taylor would come in there. You would see these big stars.
You're waitering there. It's 1980 and London is horny.
And London is really horny. We would finish shifts. We would go down to Heaven to kind of just unwind. And it was great. It was a really great place to be. I'd gone to San Francisco. I'm staying with my friend George, and I go to the steam baths. What else would I do?
To the uninitiated Marys, what happens there?
They're basically Turkish baths, steam baths, saunas, and sex. They have cubicles, rooms, they have slings, they have fuck rooms, they have dark rooms. It's like a kind of public orgy in a private space.
Sounds rather like Vauxhall.
Vauxhall is too tame. The whole of this, the whole of this country is too tame.
So you've returned back from San Francisco. And what year? Where are we now? What year?
It's 1981. So I'm back working at Joe Allen. God bless Joe Allen. And in this December of that year, I begun to hear what was happening because there was this wonderful gay paper called Capital Gay.
Gosh, I remember that. I remember Capital Gay.
Oh, yeah. They talked about what was happening, what was going on in San Francisco, in New York, in Paris, and, of course, London. I was feeling round about sort of July, sort of August.
Of 82?
Of 82. And little by little, I'm aware that sort of I'm beginning to feel uncomfortable and not so well. Most of my kind of lymph nodes begin to swell. And I can no longer work at Joe Allen's. I eventually made an appointment to go and see my GP. And I was walking kind of like a gorilla, because these lymph nodes were up under my arms. And so to put my arms by the side was painful. And they were in my groin as well. So I was kind of walking bandy-legged. And as I walked into a room, she said, "Shake my hand." And I shook her hand. And as I sort of reached out, she felt the lymph node in the crook of my right arm. And I went, "Ow, what did you do that for?" Because it was really painful. And she said, "That's the sailor's handshake. Whenever the sailors went into port, they would shake the women's or the men's hands that they were going with. And if that lymph node was up, it was a sign of syphilis." So she suggested that I should go and test. And I always used to go to James Pringle House, which was the sexual health clinic of the Middlesex Hospital that was on Charlotte Street. I arrived there and they were just all over me. And they wanted to do a biopsy of one of my lymph nodes. And they put me in a side ward. And I always felt like, because I was queer, I was put in a side ward. So my homosexuality would not infect the rest of the hospital. But I'm also aware that there is someone else in the room. I had met this person who is looking at death's door back in 1976 when I was on tour in Norwich with, it would have been Love's Labour's Lost. And I was kind of sort of perplexed. It took a couple of days because they needed the cultures to, grow. When they came back, they basically said, "You have a virus. There is no cure. You've got between 2 and 9 months to live. There will, of course, be palliative care when the time comes." And then they said, "But you can go home."
And how old are you?
I'm 33. And I don't even remember getting back to my flat. My life is over before it's even begun.
What is the world like when you're told it's all coming to an end?
Well, it's windy. It's the only word I can express. It's like just everything is kind of knocked out of you, and it becomes a very lonely place. I feel like a modern day leper. I isolated myself. I didn't know, what to do, because I realized that I needed to be around people. So I would go off to the bars in the East End, but I would stand in the darkest corner. So I wanted to be with people. I wanted to be around people, but I didn't want to engage, because what am I going to do? Oh, hello, my name's Jonathan. I have this killer virus coursing through my veins. I mean, it's not exactly the best opening line, is it? There was very little in those very early years of support. And what support was actually created by communities of gay men kind of getting together. Well, actually, gay men and lesbians, because the lesbians were just amazing in terms of the support that they gave to their gay brothers and what have you. And there just seemed to be just these numbers that were dying. You had friends who had friends who knew them. So, it was this kind of sort of expanding number of people that you were aware of. It all felt so bleak, so awful. And I think I must have felt shame too, that somehow I had allowed myself to get this, to catch this.
If you have a disease, a virus, a condition, and society tells you that you are disgusting, then you are not touched, you are not held, you are not hugged.
One did feel that one was untouchable and not to be touched. And yet, human touch is just the most important thing in the world. For someone to just give you a hug, the difference that it makes is phenomenal.
Did you ever feel like it was just too much?
Oh, God, no, I reached that point. One was picking up the copies of Capital Gay and reading what lay potentially in front of me.
What did lay in front of you?
Really horrible deaths, getting horrible illnesses and diseases. It was so awful. And I couldn't work out what to do, except that I was going to basically run a hot bath. I would take some pills that I'd got, I would take some alcohol, and I would slash my wrists and I would bleed out the Roman way. And I'd got it all planned. I'd got razor blades sort of by the end of the bath. And, I'd got the pills and I'd got some alcohol. And then the voice of my mother, Golda, comes into my head. Jonathan, you clear up your own mess. You don't leave it for others to clear up. And I'm sort of forced back to reality, of course, and that I would leave one hell of a mess. So then, like a nice Jewish boy, if you can't kill yourself, you had better get on and live. But how am I going to do that? What do you do? I would continue to go back to the gay bars and stand in the corner and hide away. One day, I saw this tiny advertisement in the wonderful Capital Gay. Gays for a nuclear-free future are running a coach, leaving at 11 o'clock in the morning of the 1st of April, 1983, All Fool's Day. What could be better? Going to join us, stand together around Greenham Common, which was the women's camp and the American air base, and Burfield and Aldermaston, which were the two British nuclear establishment. And it said, everybody welcome. The little phrase everybody welcome. That's what hit me. And I just thought, all right, this is going to be my re-entry into society. I'm going to go down there. I girded my loins and got the tube at Shadwell and came out at Russell Square. And I remember I could see the coach outside Gaze the Word. And I just thought, what the fuck am I doing here? And I turned on my heels to flee. And this voice went, hello, my name's Nigel. Who are you? And I swung round on my heels and I saw this young man wearing green Wellington boots, crimson and ochre pantaloons, this crimson Fair singlet, and this mop of black curly hair. And I just went, oh, Jonathan. And we walked off to the coach together. Nigel was introducing me to all his friends. I told him about my sort of diagnosis, but it just seemed not to make the slightest bit of difference. And it was amazing. And the next day I said to him, why don't you come and have tea with me in my flat in Shadwell? And he arrived with a bunch of anemones and 2 jam donuts. He'd brought tea. And he said to me, you're living isolated here in the East End. I'm living in North London. I know of a squat in Brixton. Why don't we move in together? And I just thought, I've got about 2 months to live. Why not? And we did. Nigel was, amazing and so full of energy. He would entertain people in terms of in his kitchen. He would he would cook meals and talk while he's cooking. And it's just the most amazing sort of buzz. I mean, you wouldn't eat till midnight, but, it was just incredible being there. And he wrote plays. It's a joy. It's a real joy.
So you've been given this short life left to live of months, and you have moved in to a squad with a chap who is a boyfriend, partner, quite quickly.
Companion.
A companion, but you don't expect to live that long.
No, I really didn't.
Around when did you start to question the medical diagnosis that you weren't going to see it through for many months?
In a way, I never kind of questioned that. I just thought, as long as I keep myself busy and occupied, we don't need to deal with that. Now that I'm sort of with Nigel, it's been just a really amazing time. And I can't believe that, one is seeing people who are fading. And that isn't happening to me. I'm not saying that I'm sort of, big and strong, but, I'm able to be active.
And what's your sex life like during this time?
Oh, my sex life ain't good. I don't want to in any way pass the virus. The only kind of notion in terms of sex is that I will go cottage. You go into public toilets and sort of at the urinals, sort of there are usually sort of a number of men who kind of are flaunting their tackle. But sort of, yeah, it was always very dodgy.
So not the best intimacy for you.
Not the best intimacy for me, but kind of one dealt with it. Ken Livingstone had this amazing policy when he was leader of the GLC, the Greater London Council, that if you were out of work and unemployed, you could pay £1, and for 12 months you could do any number of courses at City Lit or Morley College or any of the London adult education places. The next day, I've paid my pound. So I go down to Shoreditch and I enroll in this pattern making class. And it's lovely. I love it. It's so geometric and it's very satisfying. And you kind of sort of show with a little dart where you will take out fabric to kind of cinch in the waist or what have you. I mean, I loved it. And one of the tutors said to me, I don't know if you'd be interested, but we do a 3-year City and Guilds diploma in tailoring. Well, inwardly, I just laughed. I thought, I ain't going to be around long enough to finish 3 years. But then I thought about it and I thought, well, why not? Because again, that's going to keep me occupied and busy. So I thought, well, let's do it. At the end of my 3rd year, one of my tutors at the London College of Fashion said, look, I can't get you a job, but I could get you an interview for the wardrobe at English National Opera. Well, I love opera. It's so totally overblown and it's just great. I love it. And Wagner, oh God, arch anti-Semite, but my God, the music is just ravishing. So I arrive there with my portfolio, feeling very nervous, and I'm asked to go and sit in the men's workroom and wait to be called for my interview. So I'm looking at the notice board, and this letter jumps out at me from St Mary's Hospital, Paddington, thanking everybody in the workroom. And remember, this is 1988. Thanking everybody in the workroom for all the support they have given to this guy called Peter Barr, who has just died from HIV/AIDS. And I think, I want to work here because when I get ill, they'll understand. I mean, I ain't going to tell them. I'm not going to say, oh, hello, I'm Jonathan, I'm HIV positive. It'll all be by osmosis and what's the name. But it's a safe environment.
We are now several years since your diagnosis.
Yeah.
You have now survived long enough into Kylie's 2nd or possibly 3rd single. And you're not dead.
Yeah.
But you've had the pressure of this sword of Damocles, and you're still now years later.
Yeah, but I'm not thinking about that. It's not that I don't believe them. I've had a couple of bouts of shingles, but I know it'll happen when it happens, so to speak. But as long as I keep myself occupied and busy, it's almost like there won't be enough time for the virus to get involved. But the problem is that there is this awful thing called stigma. 1987 and the Don't Die of Ignorance campaign, and I completely understand why they needed to do it. But I worry that what they did with, this wonderful voiceover of John Hurt, this is a virus, it can affect anybody. And the language was there. It was spoken in the same way as COVID was spoken of, which was, this is a virus, it can affect anybody. But the press, the right-wing press, weaponized it. And they used it to attack gay people because we had made such advances with gay liberation.
What are your thoughts on accusations of it wouldn't have spread if you all weren't so promiscuous?
Oh, it's a nonsense. It's a nonsense that the English or the British just don't deal with sex very well. We don't talk about it. And not everybody is monogamous. Not everybody wants to be monogamous. You know, monogamy is something kind of created by the kind of Abrahamic religions. But the world doesn't work like that. I like people, I like sex, I like cocktails, you know, I like the mix. And I don't think that makes me a worse person. The CD4 count is the kind of, it's a barometer of how healthy your immune system is. And at 200, that was considered to be an AIDS diagnosis. You were back on the way out. When my CD4 count fell to 200, I freaked.
But why did you feel anxious when actually, for a number of years, you had been preparing for this moment?
No, I had never been preparing for that moment. So when it happened, when the reality was that here I was being told that I now have an AIDS diagnosis, there is no support network because I just get to see whoever happens to be around. You know, never the same, you know, doctor, registrar, consultant, what have you. In 1989, I was asked if I would like to be part of the cohort for the Concorde trial. And the Concorde trial was going to look at the efficacy of AZT.
And it was hailed, wasn't it, as a miracle drug?
It was hailed as a miracle drug. What they never told us, and one learned later on, was that it was a failed chemotherapy drug. And what old chemotherapy drugs used to do was that they would wipe out your immune system, but taking the cancer with it, but leaving you with no immune system. Well, that is precisely what the HI virus is doing, except it's doing it slower. Any opportunistic infection, PCP, you know, this pneumocystic pneumonia, or CMV retinitis, when you could go blind and your brain gets addled. I mean, there were all these awful illnesses. And what happened was people would rally for 3 months, and then that's it. It killed more people than it cured.
Were you tempted to try it?
No. They said, we have this cohort and we cut it in half, and one half gets the pill and the other half gets the placebo. And I went, well, excuse me, but don't you pair us up so that someone who's got a similar build as me, that we're paired up and then one of us gets the pill and the other gets the placebo? And they went, oh, no, that's far too complicated. And I just kind of saw red and I got belligerent. And I said, if you can't be bothered to pair us up, I can't be bothered to do that trial. And I then go to see a young Mark Nelson who wants to put me on the medication. And I fled. And I fled to this place called the Landmark. And the Landmark was a building which was created specifically for people affected by HIV/AIDS. So it either meant you were living with the virus or that you had a family member who was living with the virus and you could go and get information, support. It was a lifesaver. So I went there after this incident with a young Mark Nelson and said, I don't know what to do. I need to find a new HIV consultant. And someone said, oh, I've got a wonderful one. called Chris Taylor, and he's at the Concorde Clinic at King's College Hospital. Well, King's College Hospital is down the road and round the corner from where I live, whereas I'm travelling halfway across London to get to Chelsea and Westminster. So I rang up and I made an appointment and I went to see him. And he listened to what I was saying, and he then said, all right, let's see if you can tolerate Septrin. You also say you keep getting shingles. So why don't we put you on acyclovir prophylactically? So basically, that was what I was on from 1990. And that kept me going. In 1996, when my health had given out, I basically had got no energy whatsoever. I would wake up in the morning, I would kind of kick off my duvet cover, and I would peel myself out of bed and then come and lie on a sofa. I'd been having a really amazing life and doing interesting things and going to shows and going to plays, and we'd had wonderful holidays. And I just, I just was not interested.
Did you allow yourself to think, I'm on my way out?
Strangely, no. I don't know whether I just hadn't got the energy for it. But I remember, going and seeing Chris Taylor, and I had reached a point that my CD4 count had dropped to 70.
Okay, which is bad.
And so Chris said, you know what? It's time that you bit the bullet and you started the combination therapy.
Can you tell me then, what is combination therapy? Why is it important?
Combination therapy is where you take a number of medications which essentially block the receptors on the HI virus so that it is not able to replicate.
So your HIV doctor, Chris, at the Caldecott Centre at King's College Hospital says to you, you've got to go on combination therapy. How is combination therapy different from the medication that he'd put you on before? Because he'd already had you on quite a successful combination of drugs, hadn't he?
But it was not the drugs which are specifically aimed at the virus. The problem was that, of course, it was hugely expensive. But we had a National Health Service, so I had access. And I remember, the first week there was just nothing. And the second week there was still nothing. And the third week there was still nothing. And I thought, I'm taking all these pills and nothing is happening. The morning of the fourth week, I woke up with such energy. I could not believe it. It was like I was Atlas and I could carry the world on my shoulders. I was Lazarus that was just raised from the bed. And so much energy that I laid a patio outside my bedroom French windows. I've never done anything like that before. And it's still there.
Did you think at that time, my God, this might work? It's easy for us with hindsight to look back and go, and so he started taking combination therapy and that was great. But of course, you didn't have the benefit of hindsight.
No.
You had no idea if this was going to work.
No, but when it worked, God, it was just amazing. And actually, I think one of the reasons is that I am here is that I never touched AZT.
I keep reminding people of pop culture, but it's because I want to make people realize that this isn't ancient history. We're talking about the year in which Take That split up. This is
Wow.
the Spice Girls released their debut album. This is all stuff that's in
Oh,
our recent memory.
God, you're fabulous, Dan. I love this. I love the way that you put it and into an arena where people can just understand.
What's lovely about pop culture references is it stops us othering your experience. It stops us being able to other it by saying that was in the past. That isn't a life I can identify with.
I basically loathe Tories, essentially. However, I think Norman Fowler, who was Thatcher's health minister, is an extraordinary man. He not only gave money for research and development to Big Pharma, but he also gave money to drop-in centres, so places like the London Lighthouse, which was this amazing building which had a hospice on the fifth floor, the top, where people could go and die with dignity.
I had a lovely holiday romance with a lovely chap called Kevin in Philadelphia. Mm-hmm. And we did food chain together. And we spent this lovely time driving around Philadelphia, delivering food to people. And I came home and carried on with my life. And I decided to get back in touch with him. And he had a really unusual name. And literally the first thing I ever Googled or whatever the search engine was his name. And I got his obituary page.
Wow.
And part of all the work that I do now is sort of my apology to him. Just being so taken up with being a 23-year-old at university and not going on my instinct of thinking, oh, what's wrong with Kevin?
Uh-huh.
But the food chain, he was so happy doing it.
Yeah.
And so, sorry, that was a bit of an aside.
No. And food chain, is here as well. They would have a central kitchen where they would cook food, and they had drivers who would deliver it to people who weren't able to cook, or they couldn't get out, or they couldn't shop. And they're an amazing organisation. Food chain organised a display of all the UK AIDS quilts. And they are so rarely seen. They decided that they would organise for people to pick up a metre square bit of calico, and that they could make a patch for a friend or someone they knew.
Could you explain what the quilt is?
People wanted to remember their loved ones. And one way of doing that was to make up quilts. And they're there as a kind of memorial.
And I remember my friends Chris Lovett and Jane Sudlow brought the quilts up to Marshall College, which is the medical college up at Aberdeen University where we were studying. And this was a huge, I think, early Victorian hall. It was sort of moving, but exhausting and exhilarating all at the same time.
Yeah, no, I mean, it is quite something. We went to see it, and it was great because there was a lift, and Nigel was in a wheelchair, and so we could get him in the lift and get him up to the floors and then wheel him around and what have you. And I remember sort of picking up some bits of calico at the end, and silks and sequins and what have you, and had decided that I was going to make a patch. Then, bless him, Nigel ups and dies.
And you'd been on an extraordinary journey together.
Yeah, almost 38 years. And what was fabulous was that my friend Roxy and then another amazing embroiderer now called Susie Vickery, they both came round and helped me making Nigel's patch, because it's important that, one speaks their names. They are not forgotten.
So we're in the 2010s now, and many people, many HIV positive people like you, are on combination therapy. And then the results of a study come in. When was that again?
2015. And they announced that the Paris conference, having done this extraordinary study with 100,000 serodiscordant couples, so one person had HIV and the other person didn't. And out of that trial of 100,000 people, only one person turned from being negative to positive. And then it was found out that actually they'd had sex on the side with someone else. So they may have caught it from the other person, not from their partner. So they could then say that if you were on effective medication, as an HIV positive person, one could not pass or infect another person. And psychologically, what that does to you, that I can now have unprotected sex and know that I am not going to affect somebody, is fantastic. That was just such an extraordinary kind of, it just gave me permission. I could have the sex that I wanted, I needed.
And how long had it been, realistically, since you had last had the sex that you wanted and needed?
Oh, God. Sort of basically, since before my diagnosis, so since before October 1982. But somehow I managed to find a way of just dealing with it by maybe not dealing with it. So I kept myself busy doing all kinds of other things that gave me pleasure. So, I had a garden that I was able to plant.
I think a lot of the result of that situation is that we need to change our language, because I look at apps, I look at Grindr and Scruff, and I look at our conversations and we talk about HIV negative or we talk about HIV positive. Why do people want to know if you're HIV positive? Oh, so it's to know if I'm going to catch HIV. But if that person has a really low viral load and they're undetectable, it can't be passed on.
Yeah.
And so surely the conversation we should be having is, are you undetectable? So I'm undetectable because I'm HIV negative. You're undetectable because you're on meds. So actually, in terms of health risk to other people, we are exactly the same.
I think that's true. I used to come out as HIV positive because I didn't want to be in a situation where someone suddenly said, but you didn't tell me you were. And the amount of grief that I would get, abuse that I would get from people, they use this awful expression, clean. I loathe it. We're talking about sex.
When someone says that to you, how does it make you feel?
It makes me angry because, as far as they're concerned, I'm a lesser mortal because I have HIV. I didn't choose it, but it happened.
Well, I remember reading somewhere an article that said, of course, HIV isn't passed on by people who are HIV positive. It's passed on by people who think they're HIV negative.
That's right. Because if you know your status, you can be protecting yourself and you protect others. If you don't know what your status is, how can you possibly do that?
What are your biggest concerns about being a long-term survivor of HIV entering into your older years?
The most important thing is, if I have to go into a care home, how will I be treated? And it's going to be difficult enough because I ain't going back in the closet. I can't go back in the closet, and I won't go back in the closet. And I've been incredibly fortunate. The fact that I live within a housing cooperative, so as I get older, hopefully there will be people around within my community and within the co-op who will be able to help and give me support. And of course, we never thought we would age. And there are actually a lot of people who knew they were going to die. And so they just spent their money. And then, because of the medication and the cost of the medication and the tightness of funds, what happened was that fewer and fewer drop-in centres, places where you could go to get information and feel safe, they began to disappear. The London Lighthouse no longer exists. The garden, which is sacred space because so many people's ashes are there, that exists. You could look out from the 5th floor where the hospice area was and see the garden. Or if you were downstairs, you would go through the canteen and you could sit out in the garden. So it was just this really beautiful, beautiful sort of space. And of course, so many people either died in the lighthouse or were treated in the lighthouse. But the building was sold off, and it is now the Museum of Brands. I mean, I can't believe that, because it was a very special place. For me personally, if it wasn't for the National Health Service, I do not believe that I would still be here.
What is the alternative? What's the situation like in other countries?
Well, in other countries, they have to pay, don't they? In the States, you have to buy your medication. You have to kind of pay for insurance. So, it's all about, it's about cost. Yes, the NHS is paid. It's not that it's free, but it's free at the point of delivery. So they don't turn to me and say, well, can you afford this?
Now, Jonathan, I want to take us to that garden that you spoke about, the garden that had been in the grounds of the London Lighthouse, and ask you to do an audio version of the AIDS quilt. Who would you like to remember today?
The first is somebody called George Hodson. I would, go to Earl's Court. That was my stomping ground. And in 1977, I met George Hodson in the coal hern. And we just kind of clicked and got on. And we were never lovers because we were too similar in what we wanted, but we became friends. Then George decided that he was going off to San Francisco, and off he went to San Francisco. And then I remember that Nigel and I were going off on a holiday. We were going on a cycling holiday to France. And a neighbour came across the garden and knocked on my door and said, your friend George Hodson is in the London Lighthouse. He's at death's door. You should go and see him. he was up on the fifth floor and he had lymphoma and was not supposed to survive. But he survived. And, and little by little, I kind of encouraged him and he came out and he started being an HIV advocate. And there was a wonderful woman called Lulu who was a great friend of George. And Lulu tried to ring him and couldn't get hold of him, and then rang a neighbour of his, and the neighbour couldn't get in, and then the police had to come and they managed to lift the chain that was across the door, and they went in and George was dead. He died on his lilac sofa, which was his prize sofa. So George Hodson is one, and the other one, has to be Nigel Young, because I say, when I met Nigel on the 1st of April 1983, that man gave me a life, and I was newly diagnosed, or, he gave me a life. And I've had the most extraordinary life, which I don't believe that I would ever have had I not met that man. I've been medically retired, so I've got to find ways of filling my time. So I go and volunteer at the Landmark, this HIV drop-in centre. And I like being on reception. I like to be the person that welcomes people, to the place, to make them feel at ease and comfortable, and that they're amongst friends, and just, welcome them.
You have had a truly unique life, and it's fantastic that you are using the experience that you've had of that life in order to spread that information.
Thank you.
Because so many people didn't. So many people aren't here to speak.
Absolutely. When you say that oh, that hits me, because there are so many extraordinary and amazing people, that I knew personally, who didn't have the chance or the opportunities, or that for whatever reason the virus sort of got them. I mean, and I don't understand why, I'm still here. Maybe my parents gave me an extraordinary set of genes. I don't know. I think that when people get terminal diagnoses, if they don't go under, I think that for the most part, you just live in the present. Have a few things to look forward to, but that's like a carrot.
So, Jonathan, tell me, what is life like now?
Oh, I have the best life. Nigel died. Nigel died in 2022, which leaves a huge hole, in my life. But he gave me this life. So, he's always here. He's always, travels with me, whatever I do, whatever mischief I get up to. I was invited to go to this pub and talk to these young folks who were having an evening where they were celebrating elders. I mean, what is so wonderful about that is that I feel that our community all of us, are safe in their hands. And that is something very special.
And what is your postcard to the world to close our interview off, which I've got to say has been an absolute delight?
I think my parting message to the world is be brave, get tested, know your status. Having a garden is the most amazing thing, and the very first tree that I planted was a contorted hazel. And a contorted hazel is basically a hazel, but somebody back a while ago injected a hazelnut with a virus. I live with a virus. I just thought, that's my tree. So Nigel and I, in April 1989, planted it. And it has thrived. It is the most wonderful shape. I mean, it bends and it curves. And, you know, the squirrels come along, and that's wonderful.
Jonathan, it has been an absolute honour to speak with you.
Oh, bless you. Oh, that's marvellous. I'm kind of slightly overwhelmed, but yeah, and personally, I feel remarkably honoured, and particularly when you tell me that this is your first one.
If you were moved or informed by what you heard today, please help spread the word. Subscribe to HIV The Morning After and leave a rating and a review. It makes a huge difference in helping others to find it. Your support helps to amplify these experiences. If you'd like to get in touch, suggest a guest, or share your own thoughts, you can email me at hivthemorningafter@gmail.com. And remember, if you encounter HIV stigma in a bar, call it out. If you encounter it at work, call it out. If you encounter it online, call it out. Because if you don't, you're part of the problem. The theme tune is by Pauline Nidu at unstoppablemonsters.com. And many thanks to Murray Lang for his continued support. And thank you for listening. Join me next time for another important conversation on HIV The Morning After. I've been Dan Hall.